John was a man who had everything most people could only dream of. Wealth flowed into his life steadily, built over years of hard work, smart decisions, and a relentless drive to succeed. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Luxury cars lined up in his garage, a beautiful mansion in the suburbs, expensive vacations abroad, and a lifestyle that many envied. Yet, despite all the wealth, John's world was not without its struggles. He had spent years building his business empire, often at the cost of personal relationships, and while he had achieved financial freedom, he sometimes felt a quiet loneliness that money could never fix. His most precious treasure in life was his only child, Michael, a bright and cheerful boy of 8. Michael had a way of lighting up any room he entered, and for John, the boy was more than a child. He was a reason to pause, to smile, and to feel that life had meaning beyond profits and deadlines. John loved Michael deeply, and he always tried to balance his busy schedule to spend time with him, though it was often a struggle. John's friends and colleagues admired his achievements, and many considered him a role model of success. Yet, in his heart, John knew that true happiness was not just about money or recognition. It was about the warmth of family, the laughter of a child, and the comfort of home. Recently, John had remarried, hoping to fill a void in his personal life. Clara, his new wife, seemed perfect at first. She was charming, elegant, and attentive, and she appeared to genuinely care for both John and Michael. Their friends were happy for him, believing he had finally found someone to share his life with. John himself felt hopeful, imagining evenings spent together as a family, dinners filled with conversation, laughter echoing through the halls of his mansion, and weekends full of fun activities with Michael. But building a family was not as simple as wealth and appearances. John had learned that happiness required trust, understanding, and careful attention, and though he wanted to believe in Clara completely, a small part of him wondered if appearances could be trusted. His life had taught him that people could surprise you, both in ways that bring joy and in ways that bring heartbreak. Despite these thoughts, John continued his routine with determination. He had work to manage, deals to close, and employees depending on his decisions, but he always carried Michael in his thoughts, wondering what the boy was doing at school or how he had spent his day. Michael's laughter, his innocent questions, and his small acts of kindness were constant reminders that life's true wealth was not in accounts or properties. It was in love, in family, and in moments that money could never buy. John's home, a sprawling mansion with elegant furniture, high ceilings, and beautifully landscaped gardens, reflected his success, but it also reflected his desire to provide a safe and happy space for Michael. Every corner had been carefully planned to ensure comfort, security, and happiness. Yet, despite all the luxury, the mansion sometimes felt quiet, almost empty, echoing with the absence of real emotional connection. John knew that material wealth could never replace the presence of someone who truly cared. He often thought about his journey, how he had started from nothing, the long hours he had worked, the sacrifices he had made, and the challenges he had overcome. Every achievement felt meaningful, yet every success was sweeter when shared with those he loved. John wanted to create a life where Michael could grow up feeling secure, loved, and valued, not just shielded by wealth but embraced by genuine care and attention. And so, as John returned home from yet another long day of work, he looked forward to simple joys, a warm welcome from his child, and peaceful moments with his new wife. He imagined evenings filled with stories, laughter, and the small, everyday happiness that made life truly rich. Little did he know, this day would unfold differently, bringing a shock that would test everything he had built, everything he believed in, and his very understanding of trust and family. John's world, full of wealth and promise, seemed perfect from the outside, but life had a way of showing that appearances could be deceiving, that even in the most luxurious mansions, the most carefully planned lives, and the happiest-looking families, unexpected challenges could appear. And for John, the journey of his true wealth, the love, safety, and happiness of Michael, was about to face its first real test. Clara had entered John's life like a whirlwind, bringing a sense of freshness and excitement that he hadn't felt in years. She was everything one could imagine in a partner, graceful, intelligent, and seemingly kind-hearted. From the moment John met her at a charity gala, he had been captivated by her charm, and soon, their courtship felt like a storybook romance, full of laughter, long dinners, and late-night conversations about dreams and life. Friends and family were equally impressed, seeing Clara as the perfect addition to John's life. They admired how attentive she was to Michael, playing with him, reading stories, and creating little moments that made the boy light up with joy. It seemed as though John had finally found someone who could love both him and his child unconditionally. But as time went on, subtle things began to catch John's attention, little inconsistencies in her stories, small moments of frustration when Michael misbehaved, and the way her smiles sometimes felt forced. These tiny cracks, at first, he ignored, brushing them off as stress or a bad day. After all, she had been through her own past, he reasoned, and perhaps adjusting to a new family wasn't easy. Despite these small doubts, Clara had a way of making herself indispensable. She decorated the house beautifully, cooked meals that Michael loved, and made John feel as if he could relax in a way he hadn't in years. Her presence was soothing, almost magnetic, drawing him in and making him believe that everything was perfect. Yet, there were moments when John couldn't help but notice the way Clara looked at Michael, a flicker of impatience hidden behind a smile, or the way she sometimes seemed more concerned with controlling the boy than nurturing him. He told himself it was normal for any new parent figure to struggle with boundaries, but deep inside, a tiny seed of worry began to grow. John, however, was determined to trust her. He had learned from life that people deserved a chance, and he wanted Michael to feel the warmth of a mother figure. He reminded himself that everyone had flaws, and perhaps his own life experience made him overly cautious. Clara, on the surface, seemed perfect, but John's mind sometimes whispered questions he didn't want to hear. What if the charm was only a mask? What if the love he saw wasn't genuine? Despite these thoughts, life moved on, and Clara's influence in the household became more pronounced. She planned activities for Michael, set rules in the house, and seemed to know exactly what John wanted before he even said a word. The house became orderly, structured, and polished, almost too polished, as if every detail was meant to hide something rather than improve life. Michael, meanwhile, adored Clara, laughing at her jokes, following her instructions, and enjoying the new attention. The boy didn't notice the small tensions that lingered between John and Clara. He only knew that she was part of their lives now, a figure he was learning to love and trust. John wanted to believe that Clara's love for Michael was genuine. He wanted to see their family flourish, to feel the joy of shared moments and laughter, but there were nights when he lay awake, thinking about the fleeting expressions on Clara's face, the sudden coldness in her tone, or the subtle control she exerted over their home. Questions kept him awake. Was Clara truly committed to their family? Could she love Michael the way he needed her to? Or was something hidden beneath the surface, something he hadn't yet seen? Life, John realized, was rarely perfect, and while Clara brought beauty, warmth, and charm into their home, the true measure of her character had yet to reveal itself. Unknown to John, the coming days would test everything he thought he knew about trust, love, and family. The very person he had welcomed into their home might soon become the source of the greatest shock of his life. And so, the stage was set, a new wife, a loving child, and a millionaire with faith in the goodness of people. Everything seemed calm, orderly, and perfect, but beneath the surface, currents of tension quietly began to stir, hinting at secrets, surprises, and events that would soon shatter the illusions of peace. The story of John, Michael, and Clara was only beginning, and the real drama was about to unfold. The day had started like any other for John. The sun had barely risen, casting a warm glow over the mansion, and the world outside seemed calm and quiet. For John, mornings were usually rushed, emails to check, meetings to attend, and business decisions to make. But today, he felt a rare sense of freedom, something he hadn't felt in months. He glanced at the clock and realized he was ahead of schedule. The thought struck him suddenly. He could leave work early, maybe even surprise Michael with a midday visit. The idea made him smile, imagining the boy's eyes lighting up, the laughter that would fill the house, and perhaps a small adventure together before evening arrived. John called his assistant to finish up the urgent matters for the day, promising he would check emails later. The office, usually a place of stress and deadlines, suddenly felt like a distant world he could step away from for a few precious hours. As he drove home in his sleek car, thoughts of Michael and Clara filled his mind. He imagined Michael running to the front door, calling out, "Dad!" with a grin so wide it could melt any stress away. Meanwhile, in the mansion, life continued without his knowledge. Clara was busy with her own routines, arranging the house, preparing lunch, and planning small activities for Michael. The boy was engrossed in his homework, occasionally glancing up to see what Clara was doing, completely unaware that his father had decided to come home early. John's mind wandered to the little joys of family life, the simple moments he cherished, a shared ice cream on the porch, story time before bed, or just sitting together watching a movie, were worth more than any amount of money in the world. His thoughts were filled with anticipation, the kind that only comes when you expect something truly happy to happen. As he neared the driveway, John felt a sense of calm wash over him. The mansion stood in its usual grandeur, the gardens perfectly trimmed, the air filled with the faint scent of flowers from the morning. It all looked peaceful, almost too peaceful, but he shook off the thought, thinking it was just the quiet of an ordinary day. Parking the car, John grabbed his bag and stepped out. The sunlight hit his face warmly, and for a moment, he let himself imagine the perfect reunion waiting inside. The door opened, and he was greeted by silence, an unusual quiet that made him pause. He frowned slightly but shook it off, assuming Michael was still busy with homework or a game. John's footsteps echoed softly as he walked through the hall, each step bringing him closer to the room where he expected to find the comforting normalcy of home. The smell of lunch cooking lingered in the air, familiar and inviting, and he thought about the small joys of family that had brought him here in the first place. He reached the living room door, ready to announce his presence with a cheerful, "Hello," but froze mid-step. A sudden, unexpected scene stopped him in his tracks. The calm, ordinary day he had imagined vanished instantly, replaced by confusion, fear, and disbelief. Something was happening inside, something he could never have anticipated. John's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of what he saw. The familiar safety of his home felt fragile, almost unreal. His mind raced. Was this really happening? Could it be a misunderstanding? He had to be careful, he reminded himself, but the shock was undeniable. The ordinary day he had imagined, the smiles, the laughter, the simple joys of fatherhood, was no longer ordinary. It had transformed into a moment of suspense, a turning point that would test his instincts, his trust, and his very understanding of family. And in that frozen instant, John realized that sometimes, even in the most ordinary days, life could surprise you in ways you would never be prepared for. John froze in the doorway, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. What he saw made his mind struggle to process reality. For a moment, he thought he must be imagining things, that the early return home had somehow played tricks on him. But no, the scene in front of him was real, and it hit harder than anything he had ever experienced. Clara, his new wife, was acting in a way that John could never have predicted. Her hands moved quickly, her expression serious, almost tense, and Michael, his only child, sat quietly, confused and unsure. The sight made John's stomach twist into knots. He had never seen Clara treat Michael like this, not in a game, not in a lesson, not even in a moment of discipline. Fear gripped him as he took a step closer, trying to understand what was happening. He wanted to call out, to demand an explanation, but something in him hesitated. He needed to be sure, to see everything clearly before reacting. The trust he had given Clara, the hope he had placed in their new family life, all teetered on the edge of collapse. Michael looked up at Clara, his small face painted with confusion and fear. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked softly, and the question made John's heart ache. The innocence in Michael's voice reminded him of why he had worked so hard, why he had built his life around protecting this child, and suddenly, the anger and shock began to rise within him. Clara turned slightly, noticing John for the first time. Her smile faltered, replaced by a quick, almost defensive expression, and John felt a cold realization creeping over him. She had been caught, and now everything was exposed. The warmth and charm she had shown for weeks, the attentive gestures and playful laughter with Michael, suddenly seemed like a mask, carefully hiding the truth. John's mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. His years of experience, his instincts, everything screamed at him to protect his child. He stepped fully into the room, his voice shaking. "Clara, what are you doing?" The words felt small compared to the shock surging through him, yet they carried the weight of authority, of a father who would not allow harm to come to his child. Michael clutched a small toy to his chest, seeking comfort, and John felt a wave of guilt wash over him. How had he missed the signs? How had he trusted someone with Michael's care so completely? The fear in his son's eyes became his immediate focus, and everything else, the wealth, the mansion, the appearances, suddenly seemed meaningless. Clara's reaction was swift but telling. She hesitated, a flicker of nervousness passing across her face, and then she tried to explain, but her words sounded rehearsed, almost mechanical. John could sense the deception in her tone, the careful attempt to make the situation appear innocent or normal, yet he could feel in his bones that something was deeply wrong. The room, once filled with imagined laughter and warmth, now felt cold and suffocating. Every second stretched longer, every glance exchanged carried tension, and John realized that the life he thought he had rebuilt with Michael and Clara was fragile, far more fragile than he had ever imagined. In that moment, a storm of emotions collided within him: shock, fear, anger, and sadness, but above all, a fierce determination to protect his son. Michael's safety became his only priority, and John knew that he could not ignore what he had just witnessed. He would need to confront the truth, uncover the intentions behind Clara's actions, and ensure that his child was safe, no matter the consequences. The ordinary day he had imagined, the early surprise, the simple joy of returning home, was gone, replaced by a reality that felt like a sudden nightmare, and as John stood there, frozen yet resolute, he understood one undeniable truth: appearances could be deceiving, trust had to be earned, and sometimes, the people we welcome into our lives can become the source of the greatest shock. John's mind raced as the shock of what he had just witnessed hit him like a thunderbolt. He felt a surge of anger, fear, and confusion all at once, and yet, amidst the chaos of emotions, his focus was clear. Michael, his son, was in that room, vulnerable and uncertain, and he could not allow anything to harm him. Clara froze as John's voice filled the room, sharp and commanding. "Clara, stop." The words were calm but firm, carrying an authority that left no room for argument. Michael clutched his toy tighter, his small body trembling slightly as he looked between his father and the woman who had recently become a part of his life. The boy's eyes, wide with fear, pierced John's heart, and he felt an urgent need to protect him. Clara's confident facade began to crumble under John's gaze. Her movements became hesitant, defensive, and for the first time, John saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It was a subtle crack, but enough to confirm the suspicion that had been gnawing at him for weeks. The mask of charm and care was slipping, revealing the hidden intentions behind her actions. John stepped closer to Michael, gently lifting him into his arms, shielding him from Clara's reach. "It's okay, son, everything is fine now," he whispered, trying to calm both the boy and himself. His hands shook slightly, but his voice carried steady reassurance, a lifeline in a moment of chaos. Michael buried his face in his father's chest, seeking comfort and safety, and John felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. "Explain yourself, Clara," John demanded, his tone measured but unwavering. His eyes locked on her, searching for honesty, for a truth he feared yet needed to hear. Clara opened her mouth, hesitated, and then tried to justify her actions, but the words sounded rehearsed, hollow, and completely inadequate to explain what had just unfolded. Every excuse, every explanation, only made John's anger simmer hotter. He realized quickly that confrontation alone was not enough. He needed to think, to act, to protect Michael immediately. John's mind flashed through possible scenarios: what Clara might have been planning, what she might try to do next, and how he could ensure that his son remained safe. His experience in business had taught him to stay calm under pressure, to assess situations quickly, and to act decisively. And now those skills were being tested in the most personal, emotional way imaginable. John's voice softened slightly as he turned fully to Michael, speaking to him directly. "You're safe now, son, I've got you, nothing will hurt you." The boy clung to him, and John felt a protective rage ignite inside, a determination to defend Michael no matter the cost. The house that once symbolized wealth and comfort now felt like a battlefield, the walls holding silent witness to the unfolding tension. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his mind, knowing that he couldn't act out of pure anger, yet, the raw emotions, the betrayal, the shock, and the protective instinct, pushed him forward. John needed to regain control of the situation before it escalated further. He needed answers, clarity, and, above all, a plan to ensure Michael's safety. Clara shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, her earlier confidence gone, and John knew this was the moment to assert his authority, to make it clear that no deception or harm would ever be allowed in his household. He was not just a millionaire, a provider, or a man of success. He was Michael's father, and in this moment, that role eclipsed everything else, demanding absolute attention, courage, and vigilance. As John stood there, holding Michael close and facing Clara, he realized that this was not just a confrontation, it was a turning point. The actions he would take in the next few moments could change their lives forever, and he understood that the ordinary life he had hoped for was gone, replaced by a reality that required careful thought, courage, and unshakable resolve. The room seemed suspended in time, each heartbeat echoing the gravity of the moment. John knew one thing for certain: no matter the shock, no matter the betrayal, he would protect his child first, and he would uncover the truth, piece by piece, until the safety and trust of his family were restored. The immediate reaction, his words, his actions, his protection of Michael, was only the beginning of a journey that would test every bond, every instinct, and every ounce of courage he possessed. John stood in the living room, his arms still wrapped protectively around Michael, trying to steady both his racing heart and the trembling boy in his arms. The shock of what he had just witnessed had begun to settle, leaving behind a tangled storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, fear, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness that seemed to press down on his chest. He looked at Clara, the woman he had trusted, loved, and welcomed into their home, and the betrayal stung sharper than anything he had ever experienced. For weeks, he had believed that she was a partner, a loving wife, someone who would care for Michael as he did, and now, the truth, or at least what he had seen, cast a shadow over everything he had hoped for. Michael, still clinging to him, whispered softly, "Dad, why did she do that?" The innocence and vulnerability in his son's voice broke something inside John. Every ounce of his being focused on the boy, on protecting him, on making him feel safe again. But the sight of Michael's confusion and fear also brought guilt. Had he been too trusting? Had he missed warning signs that could have prevented this moment? John felt anger boiling within him, hot and consuming, yet it was different from the usual frustrations of work or business. This anger was personal, raw, and protective. A part of him wanted to lash out, to demand an explanation, to make Clara feel the weight of the shock and fear she had caused, but he knew that reacting purely on impulse could make things worse. Michael's safety and emotional well-being were the priority. At the same time, sadness weighed heavily on him, sadness that someone he had welcomed into their lives could act in a way that caused harm, sadness that the family he had dreamed of creating seemed suddenly fragile, and sadness that his son's trust had been shaken. John realized that trust, once broken, was not something that could be easily rebuilt, and that thought alone made his heart ache. Confusion gnawed at him as well. John tried to make sense of Clara's actions, to understand what could have driven her to this. The questions were endless. Was it intentional? Was it a misunderstanding? How could someone who had shown such care and charm hide intentions so alarming? His mind replayed every moment from the past weeks, looking for clues, for signs he might have missed, but nothing seemed conclusive. The house, once a symbol of comfort and stability, now felt suffocating. The walls echoing the tension and uncertainty. Even the familiar sights, the perfectly arranged furniture, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the soft hum of everyday life, could not pierce the weight of doubt that had settled over him. Every memory of laughter and warmth now carried a shadow of uncertainty. Yet, amid the turmoil, a fierce determination burned inside John. He knew he had to stay strong, not just for himself, but for Michael. The boy's trust, safety, and emotional security were his responsibility, and no betrayal could weaken that bond. John realized that love was not just about moments of joy, it was also about standing firm in the face of fear, and protecting those who depended on him. He gently set Michael down, kneeling to look him in the eyes. "It's okay, son, you're safe," he said softly, repeating the words as if saying them enough times could erase the fear. "Nothing will hurt you, I promise." Michael nodded slowly, still trembling, but feeling some comfort in his father's presence, and John drew strength from that, knowing he had to navigate the emotional storm with clarity and calm. John turned his attention back to Clara, realizing that addressing the emotional turmoil would require both courage and clarity. He needed answers, truth, and accountability, but he also needed to act with patience, ensuring that Michael felt protected and reassured every step of the way. This moment of shock had changed everything, but it also revealed what truly mattered: the bond between father and son, and the unshakable commitment to keep that bond safe. As John took a deep breath, he felt the full weight of his emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, guilt, and determination, each fighting for control. Yet, above it all, one thought remained clear: he would face this storm head-on. he would protect his child, and he would uncover the truth, no matter how difficult or painful it might be. The emotional turmoil was immense, but it had also ignited a resolve that could not be broken, a resolve that would guide him through the challenges to come. John knew that the moment of shock and emotional turmoil could not linger forever. He had to act, to find clarity, to protect Michael, and to restore some semblance of safety in the home. The first step was confronting Clara, understanding the truth behind her actions, but he also knew this had to be done carefully, without letting anger cloud judgment. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and looked directly at Clara, who now seemed smaller somehow, her confident charm completely gone. "Clara," John said slowly, his voice calm but firm, "I need you to explain everything, right now." There was no room for lies, no space for deception, and the look in John's eyes made it clear that he meant every word. Clara hesitated, glancing between John and Michael, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came out at first. The weight of John's gaze and the presence of Michael, his son, seemed to crush the carefully constructed facade she had built. After a tense moment, she began to speak, her voice low, hesitant, and trembling. John listened, every fiber of his being on edge, parsing her words for truth and falsehood, trying to piece together what had really happened, why she had acted as she did, and whether her intentions had been harmful or misguided. The explanation was far from complete, but it gave John enough to understand that her behavior was not entirely innocent, and that some choices she had made were deeply troubling. With Michael safely by his side, John made a decision that would shape the future of their family. He could not allow uncertainty, manipulation, or harm to linger in his home. Michael's safety and emotional well-being were non-negotiable, and he would act decisively to protect them both. He calmly but firmly told Clara that she would need to leave the house immediately, at least until trust could be rebuilt and the situation fully understood. John's voice carried a quiet authority, the kind that comes from a man who knows what matters most in life, and Clara, recognizing the seriousness of the moment, silently complied, gathering a few belongings and leaving the mansion, the air heavy with tension. John then focused on Michael, kneeling to meet his eyes. "You're safe now, son," he said softly, "nothing will hurt you while I'm here." Michael clung to him, still shaken, but the reassurance in his father's voice gave him a sense of protection and love, a reminder that no matter what happened, his father would always keep him safe. After Clara left, John took some time to reflect. The incident had shaken him, but it had also illuminated the true priorities of his life. Wealth, luxury, and appearances suddenly seemed trivial compared to the bond he shared with Michael. The true measure of his life was not in business success, but in the love, trust, and safety of his child. John also recognized the lessons this event had brought, the importance of vigilance, the need to balance trust with caution, and the realization that even in the most seemingly perfect circumstances, the people we welcome into our lives must be understood deeply and carefully. It was a painful lesson, but one that would make him stronger as a father and as a man. In the following days, John and Michael focused on rebuilding their sense of normalcy, spending time together, talking openly, and reinforcing the security of their home. Laughter gradually returned to the mansion, small smiles and shared stories bringing light back into rooms that had felt heavy and tense. The father and son grew closer, their bond strengthened by the challenges they had faced. John also took steps to ensure that Clara's influence would no longer threaten their home. Legal measures and careful boundaries were established, but more importantly, John's presence and love for Michael became the unshakable shield that would protect them from harm. He realized that while the world could be unpredictable, the strength of family, trust, and vigilance could provide a safe foundation for the future. And so, after the storm of shock and betrayal, a sense of resolution settled over John and Michael. Life would never be entirely ordinary again, but they had faced the crisis together, emerged stronger, and learned the true meaning of trust, protection, and unconditional love. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and appearances, now felt like a real home again, filled with safety, warmth, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. The days after Clara left felt like a heavy fog lifting from John's life. For the first time in weeks, he could breathe freely, knowing that Michael was safe, and that the immediate threat to their small family had been removed. Yet, the experience had left its mark, reminder that even in the most carefully built lives, danger could lurk where it was least expected. John spent the mornings with Michael, walking through the gardens, playing catch on the lawn, and talking about everything from school to favorite books. These simple moments, once taken for granted, now felt precious, almost sacred. Every laugh, every shared glance, reinforced the bond between father and son, a bond that had been tested but had emerged stronger than ever. At night, as he tucked Michael into bed, John would pause, watching the boy's peaceful face, and feel a wave of gratitude mixed with lingering worry. The incident with Clara had reminded him that trust must be earned, vigilance was essential, and that protecting his son was a responsibility that went far beyond wealth or status. It was a responsibility of heart, of presence, and of unwavering commitment. John also began to reflect on his own decisions, the choices that had led to this moment, and the lessons he would carry forward. He realized that in the pursuit of happiness, it was easy to be blinded by appearances, to trust too quickly, or to overlook subtle warning signs. But he also knew that dwelling on guilt or regret would not serve Michael, nor would it rebuild their sense of security. Instead, he focused on action, on creating a safe and loving environment, and on strengthening the emotional foundation of their home. Michael, slowly but surely, began to regain his trust in the world, encouraged by the consistency and love of his father. Together, they created routines, little rituals that reinforced safety and joy, breakfasts together, homework sessions, and nightly stories. Even simple walks in the park became moments of reassurance, reminders that life could still be joyful and predictable, despite the past shock. Over time, John realized that this ordeal had also changed him in profound ways. He had faced a betrayal that struck at the heart of his family, but he had also discovered an inner strength, a courage that came not from wealth or power, but from love, from the fierce commitment to protect and nurture the one who depended on him most. His priorities had shifted, and he understood that true wealth was measured not in dollars, but in trust, safety, and emotional connection. He decided to take steps to prevent such events in the future, establishing boundaries, being more vigilant about the people he allowed into their lives, and always keeping Michael's well-being as the central focus. John knew that life would never be entirely predictable, but he felt ready to face challenges with a clear mind, a steady heart, and an unbreakable sense of responsibility. As weeks turned into months, the mansion began to feel alive again, not just with luxury or appearances, but with genuine warmth, laughter, and shared memories. Michael thrived in this renewed environment, his smile brighter, his confidence stronger, and his sense of safety restored. John watched with quiet pride, understanding that the real success in life was not about wealth, but about building a home where love, trust, and protection were constant. And though the shadow of Clara's actions would always linger as a reminder of caution, it no longer threatened them. The ordeal had forged an unshakable bond between father and son, a bond resilient to deception, fear, and unexpected challenges. John knew that life could throw surprises, shocks, and betrayals, but he also knew that together, he and Michael could face anything, and that the foundation of trust, care, and love would always guide them through. In the quiet moments, when Michael laughed at a joke or reached for his father's hand, John felt a deep sense of peace, a knowledge that despite everything, they had survived, learned, and grown stronger. Their story was not one of wealth or luxury alone, but of resilience, protection, and the enduring power of family. And as the sun set over the mansion, casting a warm glow across the gardens, John knew that for the first time in a long while, home truly felt like a sanctuary, a place where love and trust would continue to thrive, no matter what life might bring.